And you can see it, that it depicts a first-century Hebrew male, because the hairstyle was from the first century, and a Hebrew hairstyle.
What if the greatest mystery of faith was hidden in plain sight, inside a single piece of ancient cloth? For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has divided the world, a linen sheet said to bear the image of a crucified man. Some call it a masterpiece of divine proof, others dismiss it as a medieval hoax. But now, something has changed. Because one man, the same man who shocked Hollywood with The Passion of the Christ, has come forward with something that could rewrite everything we thought we knew. Mel Gibson. Not as an actor, not even as a director, but as a witness. He claims that within the faint fibers of the shroud lies evidence, not painted, not printed, but burned into the cloth by light itself. Evidence that could only have been created in one impossible instant, the moment of resurrection. When Gibson spoke about it, even seasoned scientists and hardened skeptics were left in silence. Because what he described wasn't faith alone, it was physics. A radiation burst at the atomic level. Energy that no known source on Earth could produce, except one, the resurrection, captured not by brush or camera, but by pure light. Pause for a moment and imagine that. A cloth that once wrapped a dead man, now carrying the image of his return to life. A 2,000-year-old relic that has survived fires, wars, and centuries of disbelief, yet still holds the face of the most famous man who ever lived. Is it possible that the Shroud of Turin is not just a relic, but a recording? A divine photograph taken in the split second between death and eternity? Mel Gibson's journey to this discovery didn't begin in a laboratory. It began in his soul. He once walked the glittering halls of Hollywood, celebrated as one of its brightest stars. But somewhere between the applause and the loneliness, he began to question what all of it meant. Fame, power, success. They were supposed to fill him, but instead, they hollowed him out. Then came The Passion of the Christ, a film that was never meant to entertain. It was meant to awaken, and in doing so, it awakened something in him. But what came next was even more unbelievable, because after the cameras stopped rolling and the controversy faded, Gibson began searching again, this time, not for a story to tell, but for proof that faith itself leaves traces in the physical world. That search led him straight to one of the oldest, most examined artifacts on Earth, and to a discovery so intense, he couldn't keep it to himself. In this video, we'll follow the path that led Mel Gibson from the red carpets of Hollywood to the silence of ancient cathedrals. We'll explore the hidden science behind the Shroud of Turin, the battles between believers and skeptics, and the moment Gibson revealed to millions what he believes is undeniable proof of the resurrection itself. Because if what he said is true, if that cloth really holds the fingerprint of God, then the question isn't whether it's real. The question is, why are we just now beginning to see it? Faith, for Mel Gibson, was never a costume he put on for a role. It was something he inherited, wrestled with, and ultimately reclaimed. But the passion also broke him. The criticism, the controversy, the public scrutiny, it all pushed him to his limits. For years, Gibson vanished from the spotlight. Some said he was finished, but behind that silence, something else was happening. He began to see suffering, his own and the world's, as something sacred. Pain wasn't meaningless, it was part of redemption. And in that space of humility, his faith deepened. That's when the Shroud of Turin entered his story. At first, it was a curiosity, a mysterious relic he had seen in old books and documentaries. But as he prepared The Passion of the Christ 2, Resurrection, the curiosity became an obsession. He wanted to know not just what happened after the cross, but how it happened. He began reading every study ever done on the Shroud, the early photographs from 1898 that revealed the haunting image of a man's face, the scientific tests that showed no trace of paint or pigment, the fiber analyses that found pollen native only to Jerusalem. One detail struck him deeply. The image wasn't burned into the cloth by fire or drawn by hand. It was imprinted by light, a burst of radiant energy at the atomic level. so powerful that it scorched only the surface of the linen fibers without burning through them. To Gibson, this wasn't just evidence, it was testimony. It meant that something happened inside that tomb, something beyond physics, beyond imagination. He began to believe that the shroud wasn't simply a relic of death. It was a snapshot of life's return, a divine photograph taken in the instant of resurrection. And the more he studied it, the more personal it became. The same man who once sought meaning through film now found it woven into a piece of ancient cloth, a relic that connected faith to fact and mystery to matter. It was no longer just about Jesus' suffering. It was about his victory over death, a victory recorded in linen, sealed in light. The Shroud of Turin has always existed in a strange space, between faith and science, between belief and proof for centuries. Millions have looked at it and whispered the same question. Could this really be him? The cloth itself is simple, just over 14 feet long, woven in a fine herringbone pattern, the kind used in first-century Judea for expensive linen. But on its surface lies something that no artist or scientist has ever been able to replicate: the faint image of a man who suffered the exact wounds described in the Gospels. Hands and feet pierced, a gash on the right side, a forehead marked by what looks like a crown of thorns. Every injury matches the Passion narrative down to the smallest detail. And yet, there's no paint, no brushstroke, no chemical residue. The image exists only on the uppermost fibers of the cloth, thinner than a human hair. When magnified, the threads are not dyed, burned, or drawn. They are merely discolored, as if kissed by a pulse of light. That fact alone drove Mel Gibson deeper, because if this was not man-made, then what made it? In 1898, a photographer named Secondo Pia captured the first photographic negatives of the shroud. What he saw stunned the world. The image on his film looked like a photographic positive, clear, lifelike, and three-dimensional. A ghostly face stared back at him from the darkness of his lab. Since then, every attempt to explain it has only deepened the mystery. In the 1970s, NASA engineers and physicists from the Shroud of Turin research project, ISTURP, brought in infrared and ultraviolet scanners. Their conclusion: no known technique, ancient or modern, could reproduce the image. Then came the controversy. In 1998, carbon dating tests declared the shroud a medieval forgery. Newspapers mocked it, skeptics celebrated. But later, new evidence surfaced showing that the samples used for the test had been taken from a section that had been repaired after a fire, a patch containing newer fabric. The results were invalid when this came to light. Gibson, who had been quietly studying the research for the Passion II, was captivated. If the shroud truly dated to the 1st century, everything changed. He read about microscopic traces of pollen found on the cloth, pollen from plants that only bloom around Jerusalem during the spring, the same season as Passover. He read about limestone dust matching the rock tombs of that region. Even the faint circular marks near the eyes resemble coins used under Emperor Tiberius, who ruled during the time of Christ. Piece by piece, the relic began to look less like myth and more like evidence. Then came the revelation that sealed it for Gibson. In advanced optical studies, physicists discovered that the image appeared to be encoded with three-dimensional information, something that could only happen if the image had been formed by a burst of directional light, similar to radiation. A flash, instantaneous, powerful enough to alter matter but not destroy it. To Gibson, it sounded like the physical echo of the resurrection itself, the moment life conquered death. So when he sat across from Joe Rogan, a man known for skepticism, curiosity, and brutal honesty, he didn't come to debate, he came to testify. The room was quiet, the cameras were rolling. Rogan asked about faith, about miracles, about the line where science meets belief. Gibson leaned forward and spoke calmly. "The shroud," he said, "isn't just faith, it's evidence. It shows a level of light energy no human could have produced. That kind of radiation could only come from something beyond us." Maybe from the very instant he rose. Rogan stared, silent. For once, he didn't argue. Millions watched that clip later, some shaking their heads, others trembling, because what Gibson had said, if true, meant that the resurrection wasn't just a matter of faith. It left a signature in the fabric of reality. Scientists re-examined their data. Faith leaders called it a testimony. And once again, the world was divided, not by religion, but by awe. For Mel Gibson, the shroud wasn't proof to be flaunted. It was a reminder that light can leave its mark on darkness, that eternity can touch time. And maybe, he thought, that's what faith has always been, not the absence of evidence, but the evidence of something too bright to fit into our instruments. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has asked one silent question: what if it's real? For most people, that question was too big to touch, left to theologians, historians, or skeptics. But for Mel Gibson, it became personal. He wasn't chasing another headline or trying to prove himself. He was searching for what he had always searched for: truth. And the deeper he looked into that ancient cloth, the more he began to see a reflection of his own life. The shroud wasn't perfect. It was scarred, scorched, and fragile. Yet it survived. So had he, through failure, controversy, and redemption. Gibson realized that maybe faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about carrying the questions long enough for light to find you. That's what the shroud represents. Light, not metaphorical light, but literal light, the kind that leaves its trace even on linen. If science is right, the image was formed by an energy beyond human comprehension. If faith is right, that energy was life itself returning to the body of Christ. Either way, something happened in that tomb that science can't fully explain and faith can't stop proclaiming. And maybe that's the point. The shroud sits at the crossroads of belief and evidence, a reminder that mystery still exists in a world that wants everything labeled and measured. When Gibson spoke about it, people didn't just hear a filmmaker talking, they heard a man who had seen too much of life to pretend anymore. A man who had been broken and rebuilt. Like the cloth itself, he once said that suffering isn't the end of faith, it's where faith begins. Because in darkness, you learn what kind of light you really believe in. So perhaps that's what the Shroud of Turin truly is. Not a relic of death, but a mirror of resurrection. A message from history whispering that light wins, that love outlasts every wound, that even after the fire, the image remains. When you look at that faint face on the linen, you're not just seeing what might be the image of Jesus, you're seeing a story told in energy, pain, in glory. A story that began in a tomb but never stayed there. And so the question that once haunted Mel Gibson, is it real, becomes a question for all of us. If faith and science could meet in a single moment of light, what would that say about the world we live in now, about the proof we demand, and the miracles we overlook? Maybe the answer has been there all along, hidden in the threads, waiting for eyes that are willing to see. Because if that cloth truly carries the echo of resurrection, then every life touched by faith, yours, mine, his, is part of that same story of light breaking through the dark.